What is truth? Today, truth is very much in contestation, and the current coronavirus crisis seems to draw this to our attention. How did the virus arise? How is it best to be controlled? Does science alone answer that question? Can we believe any of the supposed experts? Are they really swayed by politics? And do they agree amongst themselves? Behind these questions sometimes lurks a more fundamental question about whether there is any such thing as objective truth at all, or whether, rather, there are only various points of view, various takes on reality. Could truth be really just a matter of taste or preference? It would seem that there should not, however, be any problem about truth, except maybe for liars. Truth is simply that which is the case. The only real problem here is one that the police detectives have, trying to find out what is the case. But once we know the facts according to the evidence, then we know the facts. They are established and the crime is solved. Only the criminals themselves may try to deny this. But are things really so simple? If truth simply means the way that things happen to be, then why do we actually have words for truth at all? Why not just have words for being and for existence? We can say that the grass is green without saying it is true that the grass is green. What is more, if truth is just about facts, then isn't the truth actually rather trivial? After all, the facts seem to change all the time. It is warm today, but it was cold yesterday, so what? This does not seem to fit the idea that truth is supposed to be solemn and momentous and worth talking about. One reason why we do have words for truth could simply be because we are sometimes mistaken. For example, we can lock the wrong person up for a crime that they didn't commit. So, after all, we can see that there is always a duality. Reality doesn't just exist, it's not just there. It is there for us, and if that were not the case, we would not know that there was any reality at all. The real is what appears to us, whether or not it also exists without us. However, we also know that it can appear to us in a misleading way. The scary aggressor, menacingly hovering in front of us on a road at twilight, turns out to be just the shadow of a tree. So things seem a bit tricky. Does true mean the way things are when things are appearing to us in a correct way? But if so, then does correct here mean the way things appear to us as they are in themselves when we are not looking at them? So when the tree is causing there to be a shadow in the road and no aggressor at all is walking along it. However, it is obvious that we can never check up on that untraversed road. The only reality we know about is the reality that is shown to us. So while it is possible that truth means how things appear to us correctly as they are in themselves when we're not there, it is also possible that truth refers to how things appear to us when we are behaving and thinking in a humanly normal or average way, which may be merely how we have evolved to be or been constructed to be. It is even possible that there is no reality at all beyond the appearance of things that our minds happen to project. So, given this conundrum, we arrive at one of the basic sets of philosophical divides. The most extreme realists are those who think that truth reduces to existence and concerns simply the way things happen to be without us, with whatever mixture of permanence and mutability, eternal regularities and accidental contingencies. The most extreme idealists, on the other hand, are those who think that external reality is merely something posited by our minds. Appearances are all that there is, and these are spun out of our heads. The everyday is just our most consistent shared fantasy. Idealism can, however, take two forms. It can put the accent on the thinker of her thoughts, or upon the thoughts themselves. In the first case, the thinker of the thoughts, we have a subjective idealism. In the second case, the thoughts themselves, we have what one might call a panlogicism, for which everything that appears, including human thinking subjects, is a kind of outworking of some sort of fated logical process. Something like this position was held in different ways by both Spinoza and Hegel in the past. On the whole, however, the most popular modern philosophical position has been some sort of qualified realism. Truth means how things are in themselves, how things exist, but we have no direct access to that, and so philosophers typically divide as to how far we can reach independent truth, to what degree there is only the truth of reality for us, and to what degree being and truth are in any case relative and never detached from perspective. However, if we do take this line, we are left with the problem of just how thinking and reality relate to one another. They seem to be totally different sorts of thing, incommensurate with one another. A thought of a weasel is really nothing like an actual weasel. Looking at a train is nothing like the train itself that's whooshing past us. So, if thinking is supposed to be able to register the truth about things, then how does the one correlate with the other? Do we actually have insight into this correlation, or is it a mystery? However, it is possible that this way of looking at things could be mistaken, as some philosophers have begun to suppose. Is thinking just a matter of looking at alien reality in a detached sort of way, or is it more primarily a matter of acting within reality, and with reality in a more involved sort of way? Do we know truth by looking at a nail from a few angles, perhaps as many angles as possible, or do we know it by trying, for example, to hammer it into a piece of wood? If it is more a case of the latter, living with and using the nail, then we see that our bodies already mediate thinking with reality. They naturally correlate the one with the other through action. However, we only do things such as use hammers because we are reflective and cultural beings. And we are only that because we are users of language or of coded symbolic statements and actions in the widest possible sense. Languages all have grammars, and even though these vary, they generally involve subjects, predicates, and verbs, which are all linked to the verb to be. For example, the woman hits the nail with the hammer can be rendered as the woman is hitting the nail with the hammer. And it may be that the extreme philosophical alternatives of realism and idealism and the apparent problem of correlation are all the result of ignoring the insights of grammar and over-abstracting both logic and empirical observation from our fundamental linguistic and embodied situation. In this situation, I am only I as a real subject, because I am also I as a grammatical subject who does something, has a name, and identifies herself with many different things, for example, rabbits and butterflies. There is no problem here of correlating myself as a subject with reality, because I am already fully a part of that reality and of nature. Inversely, there exist no objective things that we can classify or put into a series of categories of genera and species and so forth, or of substance and accidents, save the things of which we speak or with which we identify. We only speak of rocks and trees because we have first of all linked ourselves to them through actions or through emotional identifications and so forth. From this point of view, we can never bracket our subjective perspective out of reality. Even if our gaze does not exhaust that reality, it is naturally part of it. However, if we are talking about the true primary subject, the acting subject, the embodied subject, the speaking subject, then curiously enough, this element of idealism also lays emphasis on an element of realism than one might suppose. For who can know whether reality in itself without us is really real at all? And who can say if a stone is really there, if it only appears to my subjective frameworks of space and time, as for Immanuel Kant. But the stone that I immediately meet is ineluctably there, much more so the outrage that I feel inside me when my toe is stubbed on the stone, that is just as ineluctably there. And someone can say of me, she is outraged, just as much as they can say she has just stubbed her toe. In either case, we have a proposition that ties together mind and world, and does so equally as well and equally objectively in the case of feelings as in the case of stone-related facts. This propositionality is the genuine transcendental circumstance that we cannot escape, but only artificially abstract away from. It is much more fundamental than Kant's attempt to say what are the transcendental conditions under which reality appears to mind. For propositionality is about the preconditions of experience that logically precede appearance and which belong equally to mind and reality. This consideration was variously put forward by the early G.E. Moore at the start of the 20th century and later by Alfred North Whitehead. In the same period also by the Russian Orthodox thinker Sergei Bulgakov, and earlier in the 19th century by the Italian Catholic philosopher Antonio Rosmini. It implies a linguistic turn that does not take us further away from metaphysics as for Kant, but rather back towards metaphysics. It does so because it suggests a primordial link between mind and things and between one mind and another, which communicates symbolically through things. If we cannot reduce reality to our thinking of it, nor thought to the things about which it thinks, then this implies a speculative ground of reality that is either the world as a whole or something beyond it. Such a reality, maybe God or an absolute, must fuse together thought and things and the verbal bond between them. Both Rosmini and Bulgakov, as Christian thinkers, made the radical suggestion that even God, being a trinity, sustains in the infinite the grammatical shuttle between subject, predicate, and copula. If we cannot prescind from either thought or from reality, but must think reality itself after very early analytic philosophy as propositional, then what are the implications for a doctrine of truth? For extreme realism, truth is ultimately redundant, ultimately trivial. For extreme idealism, truth is just how things happen to be for our minds and will, and so ultimately trivial again. For panlogicism, truth is fate, and again it ends up being trivial. For the first, truth is just predicates, for the second it is subjects, for the third position it is the verbal copula. This was what Bulgakov called the tragedy of philosophy. It undoes language, the sentence, the proposition, grammar. It engenders boredom, triviality, melancholia, nihilism. But if truth is grammatical, then it is profound. It is not just the existence of things, nor is it just the way our minds happen to work. Rather, it is the mysterious conformation of reality to mind and of mind to reality. It is the poetic addition that our minds make to what they find. But that is not just arbitrary, because it is seen as further realizing or disclosing that of which it speaks. To speak of a grammatical theory of truth in this way is to say that truth is entirely to do with meaning. Logic is to do with rational sense, which is perhaps limited because it is about banishing nonsense, even though that matters, of course, because subtle nonsense can creep up on us. But sense obviously has a wider, looser, yet possibly more important remit, as in what sense are we to make of our current COVID-19 crisis? What does it all mean? It can seem as if grammar, as being about meaning, is secondary to logic and to empirical evidence, as it just proposes senses which may or may not be coherent, or may not hold, or may not be the case. But we have just given an example of how, in a culturally important case, coherence or factuality is either debatable or inherently more complex. So complex, in fact, that in these most crucial cases there just are no reasons, no facts available outside interpretations of meaning that human beings offer about their various circumstances. At the extreme limit, whole cultures are nothing but shared horizons of meaningfulness. In this light, propositional truth turns out to be something like genuine meaning, meaning that helps to complete and fulfill the real. Most propositions are not of fact or of logic, but are our tentative identifications of both things and ourselves, and both together. I am a butterfly. The butterfly is me. There is a natural totemism from which we can only ever pretend to escape. And the most fundamental propositions that we tend to accept are ones that are felt to be true. The proposition is a lure for feeling, as Whitehead said. From this perspective, then, truth is not something that we think and get right or not. Rather, it coincides with thinking and its disclosive power. Nor is it a matter of correspondence or of coherence. Rather, truth is a work that we perform on the world, but also that the world is performing on itself through us. The truth that emerges is not trivial, because it is neither tautologous like logic, nor a reflection of what merely happens to be the case for a shorter or a longer time. Instead, it is the manifestation of something abiding. For only what is eternally true can be taken to be true at all, in any serious sense, as Plato originally taught. If for us, and not just for God or the gods, there is truth, then this can only be because our propositional interactions with reality, in time, in some degree share in, participate in an eternal reality that itself actively, verbally, links the real with thinking. Thank you.